Okay, so I want to just talk about the San Francisco defensive line a little bit. They are a huge part of why the San Francisco defense has made such a big upswing this year. There's four number one draft picks almost in four consecutive years. They skipped 1 year, but they have four number one draft picks on that line, which is a big part of it. I mean, they have a lot of talent. You actually can, you can actually scheme more with that, but you can also scheme less. When you have so much talent, you can kind of let the four guys go at it. But it's not just talent. These four guys have a coach, their pass rushing specialist, Chris Kiffin, and he's a master at teaching technique and even, innovating technique. And you can see these guys are like in a track stance. This is Boza, the number one pick this year. But these guys, the way they come off the ball, the technique they use is really fantastic if you watch it close up. So that has a lot, and I'm not surprised when Chris Kiffin was with his brother Lane at Florida Atlantic, and he did a great job there as a defensive coordinator, actually. And then he went to San Francisco last year as a pass rush specialist. And I knew right then, he's going to take these number one draft picks and really make a great defensive line, and that's what's happened. Now, I want to show the other coaches, because what's fascinating is in history, this is my chart that I keep of all the different NFL teams, and this is for this year. These are all the different players, injuries, whatever, but this is the coaches, the coaching staff. This is offensive, but down here, right here, this is defensive. That's Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator, and this is his background. And you see Carroll and Bradley at the end. That's big. Fangio, some of this stuff wasn't that intense. I mean, he wasn't with those guys that long, but he really got a lot of Pete Carroll, and Bradley's like the advanced defense of Pete Carroll, even a more aggressive style than Pete, but still with like a 4-3, 4-2 kind of thing. And then down here, there you see Chris Kiffin, right here, and Womack's not the big deal there either. I actually should have put his dad in there, Monty Kiffin, who invented the Tampa 2, but he also kind of made popular the 4-3 over. When you bring a linebacker up and it's like a five-man defensive line, you slide the defensive line over into the gaps, and you have a defensive tackle like in a 3 technique. He shoots the gap. So in other words, that's definitely what Chris Kiffin's still using, that innovation from his dad. So as you can see here, these guys are all slid over. The nose tackle is not even right on the nose. He's in the gap. This is the 3 technique tackle who's right going to go shoot through the gap. And then the defensive end slid over wide, Boza, so he can make a real head start at the pass rush. And then you have the linebacker down here covering over the other defensive end. So anyways, that's just classic Monty Kiffin, really. But Chris Kiffin's using the technique of that even better, more innovative now. Now, the other guy is Chris Kocharik. He's the, I'm sorry, did I call, the Saleh is the defensive coordinator. Kocharik is the defensive line coach. Kiffin is the pass rush specialist. So Kocharik has Schwartz in his background. Schwartz comes from the Buddy Ryan line. Jeff Fisher, back to the Ryans, to Buddy Ryan. And what's interesting is they had a defensive line coach last year, Jeff Zagonia, and he's from the Phillips line. There's Wade Phillips, and actually Spagnuolo, that goes back to the Jim Johnson line. Not Jimmy Johnson of the Cowboys, Jim Johnson of the Eagles. He's dead now, but in the 2000s under Andy Reid, he ran a fantastic mix of zone blitz pressure, and everybody's using that now in the NFL. So he was a fantastic innovator. But anyway, so Zagonia had some of that, but he also had the Phillips, which is big. So I want to talk about Wade Phillips' dad, Bud Phillips, Kiffin's dad, Monty Kiffin, and Kocharik's, these guys who were coaching Schwartz, beyond Fisher, Buddy Ryan, the Ryans and Buddy Ryan to start that. In 1960s, Wade Phillips invented the numbering of the defensive line. So you had like a 1 gap, 2 gaps, 3 gaps, all that. The ways that you number all this, techniques, and it's all about the technique, where the guys are lined up and where they go, where they move after the snap. And there's all kinds of things. So there's a whole bunch of scheme going on in each of these positions, each of these personnel groupings. So there's a whole lot of scheme that goes on as I'm arrowing it right across the defensive line. Well, Bud Phillips back in the, Bum Phillips back in the 60s was an innovator of gapping all this, numbering it, and making it easy to scheme on that. Buddy Ryan goes back to the 60s as well, and into the 70s, he was doing innovative stuff on scheme and technique on the defensive line. And then Monty Kiffin also in the 70s and into the 80s. And finally, in the 80s, he was doing the 4-3 over where you bring this linebacker down. So you kind of make a 5-man front again, which was the original fronts. I mean, football has moved from a 7-man, 8-man, 7-man, 6-man, 5-man front down to a 4-man, down to a 3-man, even a 2-man now. So over the years, as the field has spread, as the players have spread, there's less and less need for people on the line. But anyway, but Monty Kiffin invented this. So what's amazing is Sala, and there's one other guy, George Seifert, forgot about him. George Seifert also did what was like a hybrid thing, and he affected Pete Carroll, who affected Sala. So you've got these guys, Old Bum Phillips, Buddy Ryan, Seifert, George Seifert, and Monty Kiffin, and they're all involved. Like I said, Zagonia's gone now, but that was involved. All this history is in here through these guys. That's the lineage. And Sala's under Bradley, Carroll, which goes back to Seifert. So it's just fantastic. So here's what we have going on. I will show you real quick. This defensive tackle, Sheldon Day, is not a number 1 draft pick. He's not a huge talent, but I'm sorry, Sheldon Day is the nose tackle. He does a great job of technique, getting his hands on the center, blocking the center from blocking down on this defensive tackle who is a number 1 draft pick, Buckner, and he's shooting through the gap. So he's going to shoot through this gap, and this nose tackle is going to hold this guy up. Check it. Okay, there it is. Technique. Holding up that center. He can't get to the lineman. Look at him. Look at the center flailing to get to the defensive tackle shooting the gap. See? Right there. You can see him flailing. That's because the nose tackle held him up. Defensive tackle shoots the gap. You may say, well, what about this guy? That's the linebacker that was on the line. He's up there too, but there's no problem. Cook will cut inside of that and have room to roll. But this defensive tackle blows the whole play up thanks to the nose tackle's great job on the center. See? Boom. So that's what happens when you have really good coaches teaching proper technique, teaching innovative technique, and scheming on the defensive line. You can then just line up in 4-man, 5-man fronts and not have to mix all kinds of crazy blitz and all that stuff. Though that stuff's amazing. And if you start to mix that a little bit, it's even more effective. So you can mix, but it's, talent's a big deal, and they have the talent, but the coaching is a big deal too.